he always says, it's like you get this exotic sports car and then you just put cheap tires on it.
It's just that's not what the car was made to do. And if you do, why'd you get a Ferrari? And that's kind of the way it works in audio.
Well, that's a complicated thing, though.
We see in a lot of the comments in the videos we do where a lot of people say, oh, why don't you review this, or why don't you check out that, or whatever. And I mean, yeah, I agree. There's like about 1,000 million things we could probably take a look at.
Yep.
But I think we should probably talk about that, because like the one thing that we've said before is that we're not reviewers. Like we're not, we're a manufacturer of headphones, right? That's what we do here. And so the whole premise has been over time as well, we'll leave the reviewing up to people who do the reviews.
Yeah. And that, of course, is a very intentional decision. And I think at some point it gets lost on people because we do things that kind of look like reviews, but we are a manufacturer. So we assume that the viewer is going to assume that we're biased towards our product. So it sort of creates a difficult situation, right? We don't really want to talk positively about our product because, well, naturally people are going to assume we're biased either way. So what value does it have?
Well, it sounds like marketing at some point, right?
Yeah, it's just marketing.
You
And
cross
that's not what we're trying
marketing.
to do.
But and hey, I mean, we are the company. We can't. It's hard to avoid not being who. It's hard to not be who you are. Don't talk about your stuff. Well, that's what we do here. I mean, we're about the hobby. But our stuff is a big part of our hobby.
Not only that, in like the semi-reviews we did, you could say, you realize how hard it is to review stuff. When you watch other people review stuff, it seems like, that's so anybody can be a reviewer.
They're better
right?
than us.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Well, we've had, I know, like sometimes when we talked about some of the gear, we had DMS join us.
Right.
I forget who he swapped out for. I don't know, you or I forget, but
or
me even, right, at some points. But at some point, we always found that he was better at kind of talking about the product itself, where I don't know, we focus at completely different things when we talk about it, and it could be just about anything, but we tend to focus on different things. And
there's definitely a discussion here because this is definitely not well understood, and I could entirely see the reasons. We come from a manufacturing perspective. We're primarily looking at stuff that we expect our customers are going to want to use or to actually use in practice with our gear. And naturally, this is a bit of a complicated one, like everything, because we want the gear to be as affordable as possible, because we're going to then, presumably, if it's good and works with our gear, make recommendations for people to purchase it, to use with our stuff. So ideally, we want the best stuff for the lowest price, of course. However, we also are manufacturing very high-end headphones. So it tends to be that a lot of people actually want high-end gear to go with it. They want it to be matched in price. They don't even want to buy cheap gear. And they also have very high preferences. They have high expectations. And they want it to be spectacular, not just very good. So we kind of sort of push past the point of diminishing returns in a lot of ways. And I think that creates, to some degree, of a perception that only the expensive stuff is good, because we don't review cheap stuff, really. But that's not the case at all. There's plenty of low-cost stuff that we like. It's just not really that well suited for our headphones, and so as a result, we don't have extensive experience.
Yeah, I mean, technically, if you look at the marketplace, a majority of the market is lower end stuff.
Of course.
Well, yeah.
That's the majority,
You get a whole pyramid situation.
Yeah. Right.
But the real kicker here, I think, is we don't talk about these things. We don't review these low price point products, not because they're junk, but because other people do it better.
Yeah, and I mean, they're better suited for it, and they're also using it with headphones and stuff that are made
that make more sense
to match with it. You're not matching $4,000 or $5,000 headphones with $200 amplifiers.
You could, but it's not,
and vice versa.
That realistic for most people.
Yeah, I mean, it's just the way it is. That's kind of the way the market is.
Well, I think the big thing is perspective, because like reviewers have a reviewer perspective, I guess you can say. I was thinking like automotive journalists and stuff, same kind of thing. Like they don't care how the car is made, right? They're just so they don't have that analytical. They're looking for like every detail kind of thing. They just drive the car, right? So
a lot of times
kind of
they don't
different
even really.
Perspective, right?
A lot of reviewers don't care about the why either.
Right.
Why it's designed like this. They're not concerned. You see this all the time. People saying, "Oh, why did they do what they did this?" They're typically yelling at the manufacturer, saying they should have done it this way or that way. And of course, they never know the whys. And I
Well,
think
they're not
there's,
engineers, and they don't make cars for a living. So
Right.
yeah, and it makes sense that they wouldn't know.
but there's value in that to
But
some
they
extent.
but they understand what they're experiencing.
That's
Yep.
why it's a different perspective.
Right.
That's why when we look at stuff, it's different because you're looking at how it was built and all that, why
Well,
they built it like that.
I think I personally struggle to be very critical of low cost goods like a lot of reviewers are, because I look at them and I understand a fair bit of the compromises. I understand why they did it. I'm not yelling. I'm saying, oh, it should have done this. It should have done that, because I understand
Yeah, you're giving them a break on
costs
all
more.
different fronts because you understand why
it's hard.
it looks like or acts like or sounds like it is. Because you get it. You get it from a perspective of you're trying to hit a certain price point, and you're not going bonsai on the design of it or the manufacturing of it. You can't. Because otherwise, a $500 amp will be a $5,000 amp before you know it.
Yeah, that is the other problem. Yeah.
I mean, the chassis alone in some of these amplifiers is expensive to make. I mean, and that's what people are paying for. But the bottom line is you can't, a prime example would be like some companies like Shit where they, it's a folded metal chassis, right? It's very simple to make. And, it's simple to make. And
Very
they're
low
smart.
cost.
Yeah, and
But
they're smart.
that doesn't mean
It's
that
still
it's
a nice
bad.
box.
They make plenty of gear that obviously is very well received. It's pretty good value for the money, right? People like it. That's not a bad thing, but they typically aren't going to pair with our gear just because consumers often enough don't really legitimately want to spend a few $100s on an amplifier to go with a few $1,000 headphones.
Well, the sonic traits.
Which is curious.
Sonic traits aside.
Of course, but they literally,
But you're
oddly
right.
enough,
Yeah.
people don't really see this a lot of times, but people, you could tell them, hey, buy this for $200. If they're buying a $5,000 headphone, they probably don't even want to spend $200. They want to spend more, which is curious.
You're
but that's
almost
the reality.
insulting the customer at that point who's at the higher end because he's like, well,
What, I
because
can't afford it or something?
Well, not only that, you think about it because I've talked to thousands, tens of thousands of customers over the phone, and sometimes you say, well, I mean, it depends on the customer too, right? But you got a guy that's been in it for a while, or this audio scene, whatever it might be, or cars or whatever, right?
It's all the same.
And you recommend something like cheap to them, and they're looking at you funny. They're like, well, maybe he doesn't know what he's talking about because, I know that ain't going to work for me because I've already had that kind of stuff before. This isn't what I'm looking for. So you actually get questioned. You get questioned as to whether you're being accurate in your recommendation.
Well, yeah. It kind of reminds me of Mike from Woo. He always says, it's like you get this exotic sports car and then you just put cheap tires on it, defeating the purpose, right? Kind of situation.
Yeah, you're not going to get a Ferrari and put, all-season touring radios on it. It's just that's not what the car was made to do. And if you do, why'd you get a Ferrari? And that's kind of the way it works in audio.
Well, that's a complicated thing, though, because some people buy a Ferrari for the image. And in that perspective, it wouldn't matter what tires are on it. They're round, they hold air, the car drives.
True.
So
if
I
you're
guess
just going 20 miles an hour down the main street,
and never cornering.
right. The point is it's very hard to understand the perception of value that the customer has. So I think from our perspective, it's very hard for us to make recommendations for gear that our customers don't typically use. And there's a combination of reasons for that, but that's just the reality. And it tends to mean that low price points get neglected.
And and it's not that we don't try the stuff. Like, we regularly get stuff through here. JDS Labs comes to mind. They make some nice stuff.
Oh, it's awesome.
Sub-$1,000 range, the big knob on top, and it's nice stuff. And if you're starting out with like a Diana V2 and you have nothing, that's great. It's a U.S. company.
Yeah.
Yeah, go buy an Element 2. They're sick.
Yeah, it's great stuff. But, again, we don't really, and we might have had it on the channel before. I don't recall. I think we've had it here. But we've tried it. It's been through our door. We use it. We talk to people. If that's where people are, where they're like,
or
I
they
can't
already
afford
have
the
it.
electronics.
Or they already have it.
Yeah, right. That's what we tell them to get.
Right.
So it's not that we are avoiding it. We're not avoiding these products. We're aware of them. And with the right customer, that's what they want to shoot for, we point right to it.
Well, of course,
or at least give them a short list of stuff like that.
We don't make money on it either way, so it doesn't matter, right?
Yeah.
I ran into that in
Right.
Can Jam, New York a few years ago. Told someone, he's like, well, I'm going to get a better amp eventually. But right now I just bought a new, $5,000 headphone and a little strap for cash. So I'm like, all right. So I told him to get the new, at the time it was new, the Spark. Liquid Spark.
Yeah.
I'm like,
Right.
just get that.
Cavelli design.
It'll be fine. It'll be $100 or whatever. and then just upgrade in a few months or whatever. And he's like, that was a good suggestion. Like I saw him talk about it a few weeks later, and he's like, that was a good suggestion.
Yeah, I mean,
get you going.
Right, and there's a lot of nice stuff down at that end. That's that's well designed, or at least well engineered, and sounds good. I mean, that's kind of what you're after, and that's the problem. When you start getting into that lower end range, there's a lot of stuff that doesn't sound good with our stuff. Mm-hmm. So you can't just say to people, well, just get anything. That's not what we can do, because now it makes us look bad. It makes our products look bad. And the product's getting blamed for the electronics or the ancillary gear. And
unfortunately, that's common.
And it's, again, we bring it back to the Ferrari. If you put really soft tires on it, and the customer's been watching reviews of these guys going around a track at 200 miles an hour, right?
Well,
you put the wrong tires on it, right? And now you're going, oh, this car sucks. It doesn't corner like I thought it would. All these reviewers said it's great. Well, yeah, because you got the wrong tires on. And it's the same kind of thing.
It's interesting, but very similar in pretty much every aspect. That's a fair enough analogy. You occasionally see people comparing two cars that are in different classes. And to some extent, it's the same thing here. They'll compare an economy car to a sports car. And people will compare it in braking, acceleration, cornering, whatever. And the viewer, more often than not, fails to take into account the differences because they don't have the information. They don't consider it. They consider what's presented to them more often than not. It's only really the heavily experienced people that really consider, well, what were the track conditions? What was the temperature? What was the humidity? What tires were on the car? What condition were the tires in? How many miles have they done?
And that's what comes with experience, because you can read between the lines. Like, the things that aren't said in a review are assumed. Well, they're assumed both ways, really. Well, the inexperienced
it's which way you
would
want
assume,
to assume,
right, is basically left to a coin toss. And the experienced go, they already get it. They smooth over those missing pieces because they already know, just like probably the experienced reviewer will avoid saying these minor details because they already know, and they kind of overlook it because it's known. But to the inexperienced, this is a question mark. They're like, well, does he know what he's talking about, or, blah, 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 because he doesn't know. So I could see where you could misconstrue a review easily.
Oh, yeah.
Either way, because you just don't know.
Well, that's why you can a lot of reviewers now seem to just cover all their bases, particularly with like automotive reviews. Yeah, they're like,
you see it more.
We put new tires on. They're this brand. There was this weather outside, so right out of the gates.
Well, it's been more common now, especially with electric vehicles. People comparing everything to like the Model S Plaid or something. You always see people in the comments fighting over, well, what was the state of charge and the battery temperature and the conditions and stuff. And honestly, it is a fair point, because if you're going out of your way to make something look bad, you can.
Well, yeah, it's easy.
Right. If you don't talk about these things, you can make something look bad.
It's real easy.
And from our perspective, we're making headphones, high-end headphones. And I honestly don't think we're trying to sell our viewers headphones. I think we're trying to inform them and hope that maybe if this works for them, if they like the product, they'll make a decision to purchase it, right? But we're honestly not trying to sell it.
As we're informing them about everything,
inform them about things.
As we're informing them about what would surround a headphone like this in terms of gear and stuff like that. And by all means, you can substitute an Abyss headphone for any other manufacturers that are in this space.
Right.
Yeah.
And you'll probably wind up with the similar results, because a really good amp, would probably work well with any really good headphone, Yeah. And then again, as we talked about in the past, it boils down to what your tastes are. Now you get into subtleties.
Right.
And that's where multiple experienced reviews might be able to help you. But really, as we said in the past, you got to hear it for yourself. It gets to that, when you get to that level, right? Yeah. Where you've already tried all this other stuff, and now you're super finicky because you know exactly what you want. And when you hear it, you'll buy it.
Right.
That's the hardest part.
But after reading enough reviews, you've narrowed down, so then you only need to listen to a few things. That's the key.
Yeah.
You don't want to listen to everything.
Yeah, and reviewers help with that a lot, as do, but it's nothing like an in-person. And we covered this before. But that's the problem, though. Like you always say, it's a complicated answer because there isn't any one answer. It's not simple. It's not like, I'm just going to pick black and call it a day. It doesn't work like that.
It is incredibly complicated because of how nuanced it is, because of how personal audio can be. And I think for us especially, I think I speak for all of us when I say none of us want somebody to buy one of our headphones and be disappointed, to not like it.
Well,
Like,
that's
that's the
the
worst case. We're not
opposite
trying to
of what
just
we
sell
want.
it, right?
Yeah.
From my perspective, that's about the worst thing that could happen. You buy it and you don't like it, not because you don't like the product, but because you purchased the headphone mistakenly, right? So somewhere along the way, you got misinformed by someone or whatever, led to believe that this was what you wanted.
Well, and that mainly what occurs is you slipped it into a situation where it wasn't designed to be. The system
Sure.
isn't appropriate. A dealer or one of your friends or somebody said, "Oh, it'll work with that, no problem," and it doesn't. And it's always that's the problem is you're dealing with it when you're at this level. Just like the car analogy with tires, it's a system, or just like with the electric cars, with how charge level is, the tires
Sure.
you're using, the track conditions, the temperature. Those are subtleties that matter in the end. And if you ignore them, then you shouldn't be playing with the high-end stuff because you can't ignore them. That's not what this is about.
Well, they become more critical.
Well, yeah, or
Because
more important.
that's usually the difference. All those subtleties are the differences between the higher end stuff
Right.
usually.
Yeah. It's an overall system. And, the guys who've been in a long time know all about this. We're preaching to the choir there. But for people that are upcoming, just, it's a constant progression of improvement on something that ultimately fits you. And that's what you're after.
That's
It's
the point.
You.
Well, and moreover, where you are at the time, what you're interested in doing, where you want to be. Because it could be that in 20 years, a Ferrari or something, a hypercar of some sort, is exactly what you're looking for. But do you want to drive it to the grocery store every day necessarily? Do you have space to store 3, 4, 5 cars?
Is it good to
Can
throw
you
the
afford
kids in the
insurance?
back?
Right. So it's like all these factors matter. And it's not to say that it makes it a bad car or something like that it's not well suited for these things, but it has use cases. And if you are using it in the design use cases, maybe it's spectacular and the best thing money could buy. But there's plenty of people that it's not for. So yeah, it really is a situation where you got to be ideally informed and understand what you're getting into to make sure it's the thing for you.
Well, that's why, when we look at reviewers and reviews and all that stuff, and you look at it, and for all of the reasons above, you've got to understand their perspective, where they're coming from too. Whether they're being negative about something or positive about something or both. You got to understand their perspective. You really do. And if without that, then you just don't know what direction that whole thing's going in. And it's the same with talking to your best friends about making recommendations of buying something. What do they like in coffee?
Right.
Right? What do you like? Well, that doesn't mean you're going to like the coffee they drink. Some people think Starbucks is great, which it's fine. Mm-hmm. And then other people think that, you'd be better off going to Dunkin' Donuts because it's cheaper. It is,
Mm-hmm.
and it tastes just fine too. Mm-hmm. So, it's funny when you think about it, but, you think even with coffee, people spend a lot of money on coffee on an annual basis. You add up how many coffees you buy in a year.
It's a lot, yeah.
That's a lot of money. It's not chump change.
It's a reoccurring daily expenditure.
Yeah. You're talking thousands of dollars a year.
You can replace your coffee habit with a headphone habit.
There you go.
Some people probably do.
Yeah.
Maybe just do both.
Yeah. Well, as we found out, you got to brew your own.
Well. But yeah, Ferrari did cover all their bases now, and they have an SUV, so practical.
Yeah, but if you're the type of person that drives across the country,
it's practical, right?
It's really not though, because you can't take it to a Chevy dealer in the middle of America to get it fixed.
More practical.
If you're driving it from New York to California every weekend, it's a horrible vehicle.
Well, probably because they saw Porsche has been so successful with the Macan, and
you could only sell so many high-end sports cars. That's
But I got to admit, when you get used to cars like this, they are nice, and especially if you can put the family in it and still enjoy driving it. Like to me, that's it. To me, now that you guys have grown up, obviously this isn't an issue, but that was the hardest thing, was being able to afford something that you like to drive, that you could put the family in, and that your wife doesn't mind being in it or driving it either.
Right.
And none of those fit with a sports car. Almost none of those things can you put into a sports car.
not really.
But if you can get enough sportiness out of a vehicle that supports those other things, it's good enough for the man or the enthusiast or whoever, you know what I'm saying? Okay, I'll have my fun car. I got my two-door, right, my two-seater for fun. But when I'm taking a family out, I don't mind driving this thing. It's not an Astro van, right?
It's not a chore.
Right. It's not like, oh my God, do I have to drive it? So you could see where, it's and that's why a lot of people have different headphones too and systems. It's the same deal. Not everyone has a huge 2-channel system in every room of the house. Some
Well-
people are good with a Bluetooth speaker in the basement or the garage, right?
Well,
They
yeah.
put their shit in the garage, but in their listening room they got the nice stuff. So and the shit's good enough. It's probably something that they got tired of years ago, but it's working.
Oh, it got handed down to a lesser role.
Yeah. Or somebody they inherited it from somebody else. Says I don't need this anymore. One of the kids, but the point is you can see how things change as you get older, and that's kind of the way this hobby is too. A lot of us are getting older. Everyone's getting older.
Oh, that's right.
Everyone's always getting older.
Correction.
That's right.
We're all getting older all the time.
That's right.
In
Yes.
fact, right now we all just got older. Wait, right now we all got older.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Problem is, that keeps coming.
Wait, it happened again.
Dang.
All right. Well, I give up. We can't.
We
stop
gotta
it.
work on trying to stop that. And
Yeah. So on that note, anyway, if you have questions on systems, we're always here for you. Email us, call us.
Go to a show. Talk to us at Can
Go
Jam
to a
New York.
show. Yeah, we'll be in Can Jam next month. I don't know. It's like the third weekend of the month or whatever.
something like that.
Yeah, just look up Can Jam, canjam.org or whatever. But just search Can Jam 2022 New York City, and we'll be there. So take care, everyone. Thanks for watching our blabber. Thumbs us up.